Hi and welcome to AXA XL Arctic Live. It's wonderful to have all of you with us. So we are broadcasting live from the UK Arctic Research Station, and that's in the International Science Settlement of Ny-Ålesund. We're on the island of Svalbard, and if you can find a map, that's halfway between the top of Norway and the North Pole. We're in fact in the northernmost permanent community in the world. And we're here for 2 weeks of wonderful science and outreach and speaking to classes around the world, and it's really great to have you all with us. This is an Arctic Q&A session with myself and Ellie, who's currently behind the camera. So what we'll do is we'll give you a brief overview of what we're doing up here. We will have a chance to give some shout outs to those schools who sent them in advance, and then we will get through as many questions from you as possible. So really looking forward to all those questions about life, science, and not getting too cold up here in the Arctic. So who do we have with us today? We have schools from the UK, Ireland, Colombia, USA and Bermuda. Welcome all, wonderful to have you with us, and thank you very much for joining. And we've got some special shout outs. We have hello to all pupils of New York Primary School. Fantastic to have you with us. Big hello to you. Hi. And you've been learning all sorts about the Arctic and Antarctic as part of their Polar Explorer program. So really looking forward to talking to you about the polar regions and finding out what you've been learning. So that'd be fantastic. And a big shout out to bronze, platinum and copper classes from Bush Hill Park in Enfield, London. Wonderful to have you with us too. So what I want to do now is, Ellie, if it's okay, if you should go outside and have a quick look around the Arctic and tell you a little bit about what we're doing. I'm going to take the microphone with me. We can't have any wired or wireless mics because of any Wi-Fi, in fact, up here, because that would interfere with some of the science experiments that are going on. Right through here, out into the Arctic. Come on out. And it's a lovely, lovely, lovely day today. A bit of the wind coming up, so I'm just going to sort of shelter slightly. But you can see the Kongsfjorden, and the fjord is the name we have for the sea inlet that runs past the International Science Settlement here. And what the science team have been doing, they've been sampling out in the fjord, looking at two things. So they're looking at ocean chemistry and ocean acidification. We can come on to that a bit later. And also looking at the plankton and plastics found in the fjord. And it's really difficult to get a sense of distance up here. The glacier at the end here is 10 kilometers away, but the air is so clear it looks much, much closer. And then the mountains, these wonderful pyramidal peaks, these are the three crowns mountains called 1, 2, 3. They're about another sort of 20 kilometers from here. So it's amazing to have such a clear view, and that's one of the beautiful things about being up here. We are not sleeping in tents this time. We're not camping out on the ice. We have this wonderful research station here, and as I said on the introduction, we're in this science village, so there's 14 stations, I think, 10 countries doing research up here. Very international flavour. So along here, you might be able to see there's bedrooms. We each have our own bedroom. There's hot showers as well. And then further down, we have offices, sitting room, place to make some tea and coffee, and some lab space as well. So a lot of the initial analysis and sorting of the samples can be done up here. So really wonderful to have this amazing infrastructure, and you fly in on the airstrip over here. We had a helicopter land just beside us earlier today, but amazing to have this infrastructure. And then in a very short time, and Clara and Hannah are out on the boat at the moment. You can be out in the Arctic and carrying out your research. So it's an amazing privilege to be up here, have this safe and comfortable station, and then be out in the wilds of the polar regions. So just give you a little view out here. Careful I don't trip over this coming back in. And we'll sit down and see how many questions. I know Ellie's going to set herself up before coming down and joining me. Set this up, clip this back on. There we go. So amazing questions coming through. We've got a couple from New York Primary School coming in, and the first question is we have what do you enjoy most about your work? What do you do in your free time to relax? So we've got different roles on the team. We have Kerry, Clara, and Hannah, who are the science team, and do join some of the interviews today and later in the week. And they will talk about some of what they enjoy most about their work. And then on Ellie, do you want to come and join in? And then Ellie and myself really on the live production and the education. I think what I enjoy most is the fact that we can be here and we can be doing some really epic science and being a very important part of the world and understanding how the planet is changing, but be able to share it with you guys. And I think that's what I love doing. That's the best thing for me. How about you, Ellie?
Definitely, yeah. It's always great to be up somewhere so remote, so extreme, to see an environment that is not something that's an everyday place for a lot of people, and especially here, it's not somewhere you could come as a tourist. It really is off limits. But the reason we do it is to be able to share it with you guys. So that's really key, and that's something that's really exciting for us. My absolute favourite thing is when your teachers share photos and tweets and tag us in it, and we get to see all of you guys in your classrooms in Canada, in Africa, in Japan, all around the world, engaging and watching and making your models and doing your science experiments. That's absolutely brilliant for us. It's always a big highlight.
And so, I mean, we have huge amounts of downtime here. Looking at the second question is what we do in our free time to relax. So in the huge amounts of downtime we have, I mean, or how busy is it up here?
It depends on what you're doing, particular roles, and depends on how long you're here for. Speaking personally, I have not had a minute of free time yet. The first few days when you arrive are always very chaotic because you are arriving with all of your gear. It all needs to be set up. The science team have to unpack and set up all their equipment, and some of that is quite sensitive, so it needs to be recalibrated or prepared. From my point of view, all the filming equipment, all the audio and camera and visual connections and everything like that needs to all be set up. So the last 72 hours or so have been fairly frantic, fairly chaotic, non-stop getting ready so that we're online, ready to broadcast to you. If you're here for a long time, especially if you're here over winter, for example, where it's 24 hours darkness, so you might not be out and about doing much field work, there's a lot more downtime.
Okay.
And in that case, we've got a games room, sort of living room with lots of books and games. There is a gym on site, real luxury. There's a little museum, and we even have some films so that we can have movie nights.
Yes.
But one of the things I'd say is really popular here is good old storytelling. So quite often, although we've got access to laptops, we could watch movies, often we find we sit around with a cup of tea and listen to stories. And one of the best storytellers is Nick Cox, who we're going to be hearing from tomorrow.
Yes.
So tune in, because he is brilliant. He's the station manager here. He's been here for years and years and years. He's got decades of polar experience. So quite often it's nice to just sit around in the evening with a cup of tea and share our stories of all the places in the world we've all been.
I mean, the other thing, of course, is people enjoy playing cards.
Yes.
And then nuts, a big treat.
Nuts, cards and nuts, big treat.
Big treat of an evening.
Nice snacks.
So
all the small sort of things take on bigger significance here. So
do.
Like a cup of hot chocolate is a real treat at the end of the day, and because we have limited supplies of things like the cards or the nuts, we will save them till the end of the day and then have a little snack. So it's not like just popping to the kitchen and getting, popping to the supermarket. We tend to ration out our treats.
And we talked about these little treats that we have, but I mean that's not the most amazing part of being here. So what's been your sort of most amazing experience so far for you up in the Arctic? That's again from New York Primary School.
Good questions from New York Primary School. Firstly, I think just the sense of place that you get in the world from being up here. The flight up is so many flights and such a long journey, such a effort to get up here. And the last few flights, the planes get smaller and smaller, and the views get more and more amazing. And you really get a sense of how far north and how far away we are from civilization, from everywhere else. And that kind of makes you really feel a little bit more aware of our place on the planet. When you go to these extreme locations, you realize the scale of the planet and how responsible we are for human effects in our cities are showing up places like here, places as remote as the Arctic. So it makes the world feel bigger and smaller at the same time, if that makes sense. Bigger in geographical scale and wonder and awe, but smaller in the sense that things that we do on one side of the world are affecting everywhere globally. So for me, it's that sort of perspective that I find quite amazing. What about you?
Well, it's the most amazing experience so far. I mean, I think in the Arctic, probably two things. The first of which was the first trip I did in the Arctic. So we're sleeping on the sea in tents, frozen sea. So we're not incredibly stupid. It's a little bit stupid. And that I think for everybody who was on that trip, that was an incredibly. It was a really tough, very very beautiful, rugged but tough trip. I think the temperatures averaged sort of 30 to 35 below in Celsius. And bonding. I think that the relationships that were forged in that cold, I mean, have gone on, and a lot of amazing sort of projects and work have come out of that time on the ice. So I think that was an amazing experience, and I think having your first polar experience or Arctic experience rather as something of that level of just brutality, I think. In terms of some of the cold was amazing. And then second was exploring the inside a glacier just up here, the Ostrobogabrin. And we had a 50-meter abseil into the middle of the glacier, and then going through the middle of that. And now you've got 50 meters of ice above you, 50 meters below. And that's...
And there's a video of that on the Encounter website.
There's a 360 video of abseiling down into that. So yes, if you want to feel what it's like, it's without feeling too nauseous,
really
do have a go. The next question is what we miss most about home.
Nothing really. I'm very happy up here. I miss being able to order a new cable when I need one, and instead having to get one flown up at big sort of logistical nightmare. There's nothing really. We're very very lucky here because we're in a really comfortable research station, so we've got heating and hot showers and really good food. So these particular visits are not so. This feels like a home away from home. The Arctic Research Station we're at. When I've been out on expedition for much, much longer, then you really start to miss your home comforts, like a nice cup of tea or being warm. What do you miss?
Well, I obviously don't miss my family at all. It's great being up here. Hi, Aruna, hi, Katya, Winston, love you. No, so obviously miss family. But I think one of the strange things about being in the Arctic is that although you're very, very remote, you have and you're in the middle of wilderness, often you can't go anywhere. It's like having an invisible wall around you because of the health and the safety and the sort of polar bears, and you can't just go for a wander. And so I think that's when you're here for an extended amount of time, I think that's one of the things that gets me is I can't just go off for a wander
Yeah.
without sort of, you know, signing out, taking a rifle, you know, there's a whole sort of series of things. There's that invisible sort of wall of the safety net which the community and the camp gives you, but you can't just toddle off by yourself. So I think that's the thing I miss.
It's a really strange contrast between the sense of absolute expanse and freedom from everywhere you look, but then, like you say, this sort of feeling a little bit almost claustrophobic in such a huge space, because of the limitations of travelling through that vastness.
Yeah, so we can't just go for, you know, what, even up
Just
to
pop out for a
the
walk.
well, there's a lovely view from the radio telescope up by the airstrip, and a really nice walk up there. But you can't go unless you've signed the rifle out and you've, you know, done all this, and you've, you know, got the radios, and you can't just go for a sort of an after lunch wander.
And even simply just going outside, even if it's across to one of the other labs, you can't just pop out and run across the road to go and see your friend in the other base, because if the weather's so extreme outside, it takes you 10, 15, 20 minutes to get dressed, to put all your base layers and then all your thermals and then your waterproofs and your wind layers, and by the time you sort of all togged up and then you pop across the road and back again, it might be an hour's round trip just to go and get a cup of tea from the mess hall, or to go and pick up some equipment.
You know, 2 years ago we had we ran out of milk, and we were having a weather day, and it was minus 50 odd below, with wind chill, and it took 40 minutes. I mean, it's about 100 meters away, the mess hall where the milk is. It's about sort of 40 minutes to go and get milk and come back again for a cup of tea. So everything can take a bit longer. So it's a bit weird up here. Again, from New York Primary School, they would like to know, how did you first get involved with working in the Arctic?
Oh, great question. Through this wonderful chap here, through Jamie. So I am an extreme environment filmmaker, and I've done expeditions in Greenland, in Iceland, in northern Canada, so still polar regions, but not this far north. And I've also done expeditions and filming in the jungle and in deserts and in tropical islands. So I'm normally, a lot more of my time of the year is in warm weather, in tropical jungle environments. And I was really pleased to get involved with Encounter, because what they're doing is bringing these environments live to school children. So I used to work as a teacher, the same as Jamie, and we both absolutely love education, and we love talking directly to you guys, and you know, explaining and bringing you and showing you this stuff. So this is my second year now producing the live broadcasts for the Arctic, and for coral, and for submarines, and all sorts of things plastics in the future. So it's a great organisation to be part of. And it's great fun, great privilege to be up here in the Arctic, bringing you these stories.
Thank you very much.
You can pay me
later. So I first got involved in the polar regions in 2009, when I was in an expedition down to some of the Antarctic islands. South Shetlands were looking for someone who knew about education, satellite communications, and generally didn't mind getting cold and uncomfortable. So I said yes, please. And was when all this sort of remote communications piece was just beginning, and I was really interested in it as a teacher, because I wanted my students to learn more about these regions, and we'd sent tweets from Antarctica 10 years ago. And that kind of thing. And then, having been in Antarctica, having done all this, was then invited on the Catlin Arctic Survey as a communication officer in 2011. So went up on the expedition, which I talked about just earlier. And then we've been doing, this is the 6th year of ArcticLive. So this very fortunate, this is my sort of eighth polar trip.
That's fantastic.
But I think that if you want to work in the polar regions, then it is. I mean, there are lots of different jobs in the polar regions. It's not just science and sort of expedition. I mean, it is often expedition-y, but for instance, British Antarctic Survey has carpenters and doctors and chefs and all sorts of pilots,
mechanics, engineers.
there's a huge range of careers, and we'll speak to some of the science team over the next weeks, and they'll explain how their science career brought them up to the Arctic. But if you don't have to do a sort of an undergraduate degree, then a master's and a doctorate to come up to these places. There are lots of other ways to come up to, but I think it is being highly practical. Whatever you do is being super practical and having a huge love of the outdoors and being, you've got to love it and have a passion for these places.
You've got to like the cold.
Or
and maybe the dark.
Cold, yes, cold in the dark. There we go. Don't shut yourself in the freezer to practice. That's a sort of. From Bush Hill Park Primary, wondering whether we have come across any rare species.
Ooh, well, depends what you mean by rare. Probably rare where you are, but not so rare up here. We saw a walrus on the last trip. We've got a sort of family of walruses out in this fjord quite close. And unfortunately, things like the polar bears and the Arctic fox are becoming more rare. So polar bear, we haven't seen anything this season.
No, they're becoming, because of the lack of sea ice on the west coast of Svalbard, they're becoming they're not so common here until the summer. So over on the north and the east coast, you'll have more polar bears because that's where the sea ice is. And then as that decreases into the summer, then they'll come over to where the bird nesting sites are, like the shores of the fjord that you saw before. And they'll be eating the fledglings and the eggs there. So they're just really following the easiest food around Svalbard. So Svalbard has had a resurgent polar bear population after hunting was banned. But now scientists very much looking at how habitat loss is affecting them and putting extra strains and stresses on the population here. So that's. But in terms of rare, I mean there is an idea in science that the further north you go, the less biodiversity you get. Although that gets, as you see some articles saying that that's not quite true. But I think in general rule of thumb, I'm getting a nod that further north or toward the poles, and so I don't know. I imagine if you trawled for enough plankton, you'd find a new species up here at some point. Or you did sort of sediments, there might be some unknown worm. But that is not the focus of the research that we're doing at the moment. So we're really looking at the environment, so the marine chemistry and the plastics there. So, but if we do come across something that deserves more study, we will definitely let you know at Bush Hill Park. Sorry, just read the next one. Ellie and Jamie, you're both looking very healthy. Congratulations, you're looking healthy.
Oh, thank you.
You're looking very healthy.
You're looking very healthy. Thank you very much.
We have been looking at how important your diet is. So diet. Let's talk about diet and polar work.
Very good question. So, as I said before, we're very lucky here because we're on a very comfortable research base. So we get meals provided here, and we have lots of tea and biscuits and really nice, lovely hot meals. We have porridge for breakfast, and we even have fresh fruit. It's a little bit limited, but still got lots of delicious things.
I mean, it's an interesting thing is you talk about fresh fruit. There is a sign by the fresh fruit bowl saying, only take one piece of fresh fruit per person. I think it was per meal or per day.
Per day, yeah.
So it is very limited, and that is one of the luxuries because that's flown in. Most of the rest of the food gets shipped in on a sort of monthly basis or so. So the fresh stuff is the big luxury. And I think we've just got some views of the stations, just so you've got an idea around what's going on. So in terms of food, I think that one of the things to think about is calories. So calories are just an amount of energy in a certain food. And so sometimes having a high calorie diet is important. Sometimes having a low calorie diet is important. It really depends on what your situation is. And so when we, Kerry and I, were on the Catlin Arctic survey, working at temperatures sort of -35, and also doing more physical work, than we are at the moment. We're very lucky we've got an electric winch on the boat, but there was a bicycle winch when we were in the Arctic the first time. You're really looking at, so for for a normal diet, you're looking at 1500 to 1500, 2000 calories a day. And then also you are then looking to double that for the cold. So if you're, we had unheated sleeping tents, you're looking to burn that extra, you need another sort of 1500, 2000 calories just to burn, just to sort of keep you warm, and you really feel your metabolism change. It's like you eat a chocolate bar and you just feel that sort of heat up immediately.
You do physically feel warmer.
And then I suppose the other thing is, if you're working hard, like anything, if you have a high energy day, then you're eating sort of a few more. And then if you're man hauling, so that's the name given to pulling a sled across the polar regions, you're looking at the diet anything up to 7,000 calories a day.
Especially when you think some of the sleds that are being pulled could be 100 to 300 kilos. So if you don't try that at home, try dragging 300 kilos, but maybe try just dragging 50 kilos along behind you.
Well, I think we've got an activity online and we can post that in there, which is a tyre dragging relay. So there's, depending on how strong you're feeling, different sizes of tyre, from a car tyre all the way up to a tractor tyre or anything else, just to get a sense of what it feels like. And we've actually also got a menu planning activity as well. Yeah. And it makes you look at nutrition in a different way, insofar as I think we worked out for 50 polar days you would need, if you just ate peanut butter.
Oh yeah, this is great.
Really, really high energy food, lots of calories, lots of great fats. You need 89 kilos of peanut butter, I think, for 50 days of polar bear.
And it's always a balance between the weight and the energy as well, because if you need 59 kilos of food to be able to have enough energy to drag your sled, but then your sled now weighs 59 kilos more, you need more energy, so then you need more food, but then it weighs more, so you need more energy. So it's always a bit of a balance, getting the most energy dense food possible in the smallest volume, so that you're not spending all your food.
Yeah, two tons of lettuce, I think it was, to get enough calories. 2 tons of lettuce. To get enough calories to get to the. So
not lettuce for the North Pole.
No, and it's really important that when you look at nutrition, you look at what job you're trying to do, and it's not saying that you should eat just peanut butter or you shouldn't eat any fresh vegetables, but it's just looking at your situation and what you're trying to do to keep your body nice and healthy.
Yeah, things like dried fruit as well are really useful to get your vitamins in, but without carrying lots of extra water weight, and of course it lasts for longer as well. So it's always a balance between the peanut butter sandwiches and chocolate and peanuts versus some dried apricots and that sort of thing. Some seeds as well.
Okay. Yeah, I've got another question for you. It's again from Bush Hill. And
is it Bush Hill who've got copper class? They've got
bronze, platinum, and copper.
Brilliant, because Clara is studying copper at the moment. So copper class, you should watch Clara's interviews, and you can learn a little bit more about how copper is affecting the worms in deep mud.
Or not. But they would like to know, if you could have one food teleported to you, what would it be?
Ooh. That is a good question. You know what it'd be? Probably actually be a drink. It would be a chai latte. I absolutely love chai. It's like Christmas in a cup. It's a really spicy drink with nutmeg and cardamom and ginger and cinnamon, and it's absolutely delicious. It's a real comfort drink, and I drink it quite a lot everywhere else in the world, and they don't have it here. So that's something I'd bring next time. Bring some sachets with me.
Yeah.
What would you bring?
I'm really, really happy here. It's the food. The food is absolutely brilliant. But you may have heard of the Expedition Fridge, which is an imaginary fridge that will suddenly appear on top of a mountain pass or behind a tent in the Arctic, which will have everything you want in it. And you can dream about opening the Expedition Fridge, and it has everything. So the thing I miss most on expedition, weirdly, is a bowl of cornflakes with this normal milk, which isn't either powdered milk or rehydrated something or diluted something else, or just like milk. And then crunchy cornflakes. Because it's so inaccessible, everything can get a bit mushy on expedition.
A bit stodgy or a bit mushy.
A bit mushy or a bit stodgy and a bit sort of practical.
Yeah, there's not much here that has crunch.
Yeah, like so crunchy,
fresh salad.
And you could even go full on for the crunchy nut cornflakes, and just completely, just go in for some very over sugared, just treat meal. So that's milk and cornflakes. That's my one. Right, we're getting into some pretty serious questions. Stoke Cannon would like to know. Would like to know, have you seen any signs of climate change?
Oh, great question. So the important thing to remember is that climate change happens over a very long period of time. So we might see individual, say, annual variation or seasonal variation. And sometimes it can be quite stark. It can be quite a strong contrast. So last year, for example, when we were here, it was actually quite warm. And when I say warm, we're talking -3 or -2 as opposed to -10 or 20. So still cold compared to some other places, but it was warmer than usual, and we saw a lot of melting. And then this year we've had some rainfall quite early on in the year, so earlier than normal. So it's too soon to definitively say that is directly evidence of climate change. And certainly from one year to the next, you can't make those kind of predictions based on such a short period of time. However, what we've seen in the last few years, combined with the historical evidence of the people that have been here and the scientific data from the last 20, 30, 40, 50 years, is certainly showing that our last couple of years of evidence is part of a bigger trend, and that trend is the one that's known to be caused by the global warming and climate change. So you sort of see evidence of it, but the individual, you can't point at a melting bit of ice and say that's climate change in front of my eyes. They're all tiny parts of a jigsaw that you need lots of different science all agreeing at the same time before you can see the big picture.
Yeah, I think I'm just continually sort of shocked. I think you can be shocked but not surprised. There's the 2 times I've been up in March in 2016 and 2017 to have plus temperatures. So you're in the Arctic, you're in the northernmost community in the world, and you're in March, and it's not 24-hour sunlight yet, and you're getting rain, and you're getting positive temperatures. And looking at the sort of overall trend,
longer trends.
That pattern is getting more frequent of having these early warm temperatures, and it plays havoc. And plays havoc with we were exploring this other glacier, and some bits of ice dropped off overnight because the temperature was swinging sort of 20 degrees from sort of +3 to -20 sort of overnight, and it plays havoc with the wildlife because you've got this melt. And then you've got the freeze, and instead of it being snow out and about, it's now becoming ice out and about, and that just makes it really difficult.
Yeah, I think that's something that's quite an unusual concept, and it's important to understand that being very, very cold is not a bad thing for the animals here, because they're adapted to it. They're used to being at -20, -30 degrees, and they actually survive very, very well in that very dry cold. The actual danger, and what's far worse, is when it gets warmer, if the temperature hovers around 0. If it stays below 0, then everything stays frozen, and snow is easy to dig through, to get through to the moss and the plants underneath, and berries and things to forage, and also for animals to bury their food. So foxes, for example, a bit like squirrels burying their nuts, foxes will dig down and they'll bury little stores of food for the winter. When you hover above 0, if you go above 0, that snow starts to melt and becomes water, and then you drop the next day back down, it freezes, melts, freezes, melts, freezes, and that means you get layers of ice building up. And it's much, much harder for the local wildlife to be able to dig through, whether it's birds or foxes, to be able to get through that snow to the plant life underneath. So it's almost a sort of a danger zone, really,
I mean,
isn't
it is.
it?
I mean,
that
you've
range.
seen. I think it was. I can't remember whether it was 2015, 16, or 17, but certainly sort of in the past sort of 5 years in Longyearbyen, which is the main town on Svalbard, sort of 25-minute flight that way. They've had more avalanche issues, and they've had sort of houses cleared out, and that is because there's sort of snow sitting on top of that ice layer.
Really slippy, and
makes it much less stable.
Yeah.
So
and also the sea ice out here, we used to be across the fjord, which we showed you at the beginning. That's obviously now just all water. That used to be sea ice. Still at this time of year would be, you could walk across or ski across it, and now we haven't had sea ice.
No,
this time of
you
year
hear stories of driving tractors across the fjord, and any time of year I've been here, I mean, I've found some slushy sea ice last year, but there's never been something that you could drive a tractor across.
And so that obviously affects the sort of travel and transport for the local area for humans, but it also, of course, affects the routes for migration and for going for food, and seals and polar bears not having as much ice to climb on and to walk across. And so there are lots of changes going on here, and the effects are visible.
Thank you very much. Walnut and Sycamore classes in Oxford.
Hi.
They would like to know, what is it like working with different scientists from around the world?
Oh, it's great. It's absolutely brilliant. So working with scientists in general is amazing, because scientists all have a real passion for what they study. Some of them have become scientists because it's almost a calling. They were just drawn to answering questions. Scientists tend to be very curious people. They tend to be very interested in lots of different things. And of course, they're full of knowledge as well, so you can learn all sorts. So I'm constantly asking questions and learning about lots of different topics from all these experts in the field. Working with international teams is great as well, because science is studied in very different ways around the world, and of course different cultures and languages and different kind of cultural expressions, and it's really, really cool being part of an international team and seeing all these people coming somewhere like this where it's unfamiliar to everybody, so everybody's equally a foreigner. And you all kind of get along together and swap stories. And I've been very lucky that I've got to travel all over the world and work with scientists in their home countries, but also in really remote regions, in the jungle, in the poles. And it's a great community to be involved with.
No, and it's really great here is this research supplement is basically shows international collaboration. So there's 14 research stations here. There's 10 countries have research stations, and then even more nationalities coming here to be members of research teams. And that international collaboration is critical. The issues that we're facing don't know borders. The way that we have constructed our different disciplines, and you all know that at school, so we've separated your learning into geography and maths and physics and chemistry and biology and those types of things. The world doesn't really know that. So although we learn it in these different disciplines, the world is interdisciplinary, so meaning that we have to join these different ways of seeing and knowing together. And I think being here where you have a range of different scientists and a range of different countries doing that science is more closer to the way the world works than if we say that only people who study glaciology who live in the UK can come to Ny-Ålesund, and that's the only way we're going to find out about the Arctic. So I think that is what Ny-Ålesund, this community, shows is probably how science could be done in a way that will help us understand our world better.
Much more collaboratively, and it allows us access to those pockets of information that is very difficult to find out otherwise. Especially the science going on here is very specialised and very niche. So being able to share those stories and find out what the Japanese research team is studying to do with carbon dioxide, or what the Norwegian team is looking at in terms of plankton, for example. These are such different areas. So science is such a broad subject. It's really good to be able to kind of find out and hear about these publications that we might not necessarily see in the media or in the news in the UK or the US or where you're from. So yeah, it's good.
That's a really great question. So thank you to Walnut and Sycamore classes for that. We've got a couple of very practical questions coming back from Bush Hill Park Primary. First of all, what is the most difficult thing that you have survived through? And that can probably be anywhere. It doesn't have to be a polar example.
Good question. What school's that from?
That's from Bush Hill Park.
Good question, Bush Hill Park. I've been through a fair number of different things. Don't want to scare everyone and put everybody off doing science or expeditions, but I've been in a couple of hurricanes, which is more just hold on and, hunker down and wait and see, which is quite scary sometimes. I think one of the things that's good here is that there's no creepy crawlies or nasties to bite you, because most of my work is in the jungle, and I've had a few encounters with some quite dangerous insects or snakes or spiders, and I've also had dengue fever and chikungunya fever. They're not pleasant at all, and it's really, really not fun, and you end up in a hospital for tropical diseases.
Most difficult thing. Go on, let's get down to the one.
Surviving those, I think, is pretty tough when you've got work to do and you have to still get up and drag your camera equipment through the snow or through the jungle. Carrying the equipment's probably the most difficult. It's heavy.
None of that I've done. I really don't.
Stay away from creepy crawlies.
I stay away from creepy crawlies as much as possible, and really dislike the sea snakes. They give me I don't like snakes. I really don't like snakes. That's my. And then sea that's taking it one step too far, because they move much faster than you do through the water. A few landslides, a few being stopped at gunpoint by people, a few really stupid decisions. In the Himalayas, which I probably shouldn't have done. Most difficult thing you survived through. I think probably just I don't know. I'm gonna have to kind of come back to that. Most difficult thing.
I think a lot of it is
-48 in a tent in the Arctic. Just brutal.
It's just extreme environments.
I think the cold is that what you don't realise is that how much cold can hurt. And I think that until I reckon you down to, if you've not even done -30 and below, you don't properly understand how cold actually hurts. And it's not just it's that stingy, hurty cold when you get a bit fresh, normally it is properly inside your body pain. It's like your body's having to work so hard not to freeze that it's like every single bit of your body runs a marathon every day, and you feel it just to keep you warm, and there's nothing you can do about it.
There's no escape from it either. You can't get away from it. It's just
you can eat chocolate and put on clothes. That's about it. And run around.
But it really is amazing what our bodies survive, put up with.
Great. We've got time for 2 more questions. One of them's from Bush Hill Park and one of them's from Stoke Cannon. Bush Hill Park will do first. What is the most useful item in your kit?
In my kit, probably my laptop, because that allows me to connect cameras to the internet so that I can stream this to you. It allows me to edit and shoot footage and edit footage, so I can make little mini films, so I can work anywhere. Even if I'm not connected, I can still work, and then when I am connected, I can email and catch up. And I take that with me everywhere. It's very, very useful, hardy, resistant piece of kit that's been dropped a few times and got a bit wet a few times, but still going strong.
Can I have 3?
No, you can have 1. Go on, you can have 3.
Number
Greedy.
1, duct tape.
Duct tape, can't live without duct tape.
I would say that duct tape, followed by cable ties.
Yeah.
Followed by a multi-tool like a Leatherman. Those 3 things.
Fix everything with those.
Fix everything with those. In fact, I had a first aid course with sort of gaffer tape and cable ties on that, so that was interesting. But so the ability to fix things because you can take whatever kit you think is going to work and everything else, and then it will break or it will not work, and you have to be able to then make something else. So I'd say the fixie stuff.
Yeah, string and
general
bits and bobs.
Last question, and really important question to end on, from Stoke Cannon: how do you limit your carbon footprint while in the Arctic?
Oh, that's a really good question. So we, firstly, flights. Obviously, big carbon producer is flights in and out. So we offset those by planting trees and pay off our carbon debt in that way. And of course, they try and limit the flights in and use shipping instead, and things like limiting how much fresh fruit we eat and rationing food so that we're not consuming so much that we require lots of flights in. Once we're here, we've got we're all quite conscious about recycling, not using too much water, not using too much heating, switching things off when we don't need them. So general lifestyle is quite conservative and quite conscious.
I think there is a contradiction in terms of doing Arctic science in so far as we are powered by fossil fuel here, because it is the only fuel base in terms of survivability that people feel can produce a constant amount of energy, and that the power stations over there. So we're not on renewables, and we do fly in, and so you have to think, okay, is that justifiable? Is coming up to do this science worth that? Even if you do offset, which we're going to set up this offset scheme in the Scottish Highlands for all our trips, even if you do offset, could I have avoided that? Do I really need to come to the Arctic to find out how it's changing? Is the fact that it's an early warning system in terms of ocean acidification. It's important to know how even remote areas are being affected by marine plastics and understand those things. Personally, I think it's really important that if there's a few of us come up here, we can then talk to tens of thousands of young people across the world and share this more directly. But we do have to think about it all, because we could not come and still offset carbon. So it's a really good question, and there is a contradiction in terms, but I think we're getting the balance okay. Maybe we'll be able to teleport here in the future. That's probably to take a huge amount of energy, but who knows?
But as long as we're all doing what we can in terms of reducing meat consumption, for example, and trying a plant-based diet, say once a week or more if possible, reducing absolutely unnecessary travel, definitely, and limiting our consumption of resources of all kinds, whether that's plastic or water or fossil fuels, then when we do need to use those fuels or we do need to travel, at least we can justify that it's for the right endeavour, for the right purpose, and it adds real meaningful impact to a big audience. So yeah, it's a balance that you have to kind of ask yourself constantly as to at what point does it become not worth it, or can we justify it? It's a good question.
Really good question.
And there is a website, maybe the Encounter team in London can add a link. There is a website where you can go online, and it's a quiz that it will ask you, what form of transport do you use to get to school? How much meat do you eat? What sort of laundry do you do? It's lots and lots of questions. And at the end, it will tell you what your carbon footprint is, and it will give you some suggestions. So what you could do as a challenge, maybe as your homework, would be to do a carbon audit for, say, a week and see what your carbon footprint is. And then you could try switching to different type of transport, different type of diet, those sorts of things, and see how much you can reduce it by.
Brilliant suggestion. Unfortunately, that is all we have time for today. So thank you very, very much to all those schools who took part. Really great to have your questions coming through. Don't forget, we've got more sessions this afternoon. If you're still at school, we have a Arctic Food Web live investigation, and then we have an expert interview with our science team. Tomorrow we are looking at keeping warm in the Arctic and talking to Nick Cox, our amazing station manager. And we have super sessions next week on Monday, Tuesday and Wednesday. But thank you so much for being part of AXA XL Arctic Live. Until the next time, it's goodbye from the Arctic. Bye bye.